researcher at the Freeman Army Airfield Museum in Seymour, which I still need to get to. I know Rowena's been there. Anybody else ever visited that museum? Well, we might have to take a group trip sometime. By accident. Oh, Larry, you're on. Welcome.
I'm on, okay. Well. Okay, so just a little bit about me. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was in country the whole year of 1966, way early in the war. Moved to Seymour in 98, retired from the plastics industry in 99. So I've been retired for a long time. As a second career, I started doing flight instruction, and I did that as a pilot examiner for the FAA up until 2018. But along the way, I got involved with our museum and joined the board in 2002. I was president for 5 years, and then they appointed me curator because I asked. My problem was I beg stuff from people, and I'm pretty good at it. But the problem is sometimes you need a title. You know, you have to sound like you have some level of authority. So they made me curator. I'm not really a historian. I happen to like to build displays. And I like technology, and I like public speaking. So I just kind of fill that niche. Usually ask people to turn their cell phone off when I speak, and I will make sure mine is turned off. And that's about it about me. I do have, I'm 82 years old, and if I stand up for a long time, my right thigh starts to hurt, so I usually prefer to speak sitting down. So please don't be offended. I'm not being disrespectful. So Rowena asked me to talk about a little bit about our museum and tell you about that, and then talk about the Tuskegee Airmen. Oh, lights, yeah. Oh, it'll be out. You'll get more contrast, right. Okay, neat, thanks. So the city of Seymour had a little airport for a long time, but when World War II broke out, after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the Army Air Corps was running around tearing their hair out trying to figure out how they were going to train enough pilots in a heck of a hurry. So they sent a couple teams of people around the country to select training sites. And so one of the teams came to Seymour, and they said, oh yeah, we'll put a base right here. Well, guess what? The leader of the team was a guy named Captain Preuss. He was from Seymour. Guess how he came to pick it? So anyway, that's how Freeman Army Airfield came into being. It was a good choice, though, because there was a north-south and east-west railroad that went through Seymour at that time, and Route 50, which I drove over here on, and the north-south route then was Route 31. And so there was good roads and good rail transportation in and out of Seymour. So during the World War II years, we trained a little over 4,200 bomber pilots, not fighter pilots. Fighter pilots went to different bases. But the ones that came to Seymour were on the bomber track. And they flew these AT-10 airplanes, like the one in the picture. There's only one left. And it's at the Air Force Museum up in Dayton, and that's a picture of it taken in 2024 by a friend of mine who's a pretty good amateur photographer. The problem with it is it's a small airplane, and since it's not really famous, up at the Air Force Museum, they have it in behind other great big airplanes, and you try to back up and get the whole airplane in, and suddenly you're looking at another airplane or a cabinet or something. So it's really hard to photograph where it is. Anyway, to run the base at Seymour took about 5,000 people that were stationed there. So in no time, the population of Seymour went from about 8,000 people to 15,000 people in less than a year. And there were people living in garages and basements. There wasn't enough housing, but there was a war on and people made do. And so we trained pilots at Seymour. They built this base, by the way, in 9 months. The team came in, selected the place. They started in like January. They started construction in April, and they opened the place in December, all in the same year. And guess what? They didn't do any environmental studies. They didn't give a fig about spotted owls or snail darters or anything else. They just brought bulldozers in and flattened it completely. It was already pretty flat. And built runways and put up buildings, and poof, it was an air base. The training went on then, that took all of 1942. So the training went on in 1943 and 1944. By the end of 1944, we were already winning the war in Europe, right? So they didn't need to train more bomber pilots. They could pull bomber pilots out of the European theater and send them to the Pacific. So the last class of would-be bomber pilots graduated in February of 1945, and they, at that point, closed the base. But in the meantime now, this is where you start to get into the Tuskegee Airmen era. So a couple things happened after they stopped the formal multi-engine pilot training. Oh, maybe I should explain. The pilots that trained at Seymour didn't learn to fly bombers there. When they came there, they had already learned to fly little single-engine airplanes. This was intermediate training. They called it advanced training. But they learned to fly the twin-engine airplane, and they learned to fly solely by reference to instruments. And the whole program was only 9 weeks. And then from Seymour, they went on to learn to fly the really big airplanes, like B-17s and B-24s and so forth. So that's what really happened at Seymour for 2 years. Closed the place. But since we were winning the war in Europe, we started capturing enemy airplanes. And the Germans were way more advanced than the American Air Force services, and for that matter, Germans were more advanced than the Italians or the Japanese. So they started capturing enemy airplanes. They couldn't fly them across the ocean, so they took the wings off and put them on ships and sent them to the States. And then once they got into New York Harbor, they lifted them off the ships, put them on rail cars, and sent them principally up to what's now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base up by Dayton. But they soon got too many for up there. And what are we going to do with them? Oh, send them to Seymour. They have 5 big empty hangars and big runways. They have lots of room, and they had stopped doing the training. So they sent 160 captured enemy airplanes over time to Seymour. And Seymour became the Foreign Aircraft Evaluation Center. And so for about a year and a half, went on up through October of '46, there were teams of people evaluating these enemy airplanes. Okay, and then in October '46, they closed the base again, and that was the end of it. It stayed closed after that. And now it's just simply the airport for the city of Seymour. And also, and primarily it's an industrial park. It's an industrial park with runways, rather because the aviation isn't the principal activity. All right, now, how far ahead did I get? So today, today the museum is 2 buildings that were there in World War II. So our buildings are old. They actually had flight simulators in them. And our museum is open on Saturdays from 10 till 2, but especially if you could get a group together, we regularly open during the week for people that call us. I only live 8 minutes from the museum, and we have several of our board members live quite close by, and if I can't make it, somebody else can. So you're not limited to Saturdays, especially if you give us a couple days' notice. It takes about an hour and a half to go through the whole museum. We love groups. Admission is free. Parking is free. And like all museums, we'd be happy to take a donation. All right. So now that's a quick overview of how Freeman Field got started and what it is today. I guess I should mention that during World War II, if you don't know this, there was no United States Air Force. All the flying was done by the United States Army Air Corps. So all aviation stuff was Army. The Air Force wasn't established as a separate entity until 1947, well after the war was over. Okay. So February is Black History Month, so we get a lot of interest in the Tuskegee Airmen. We have it all year round, but we get a lot more in January and February. So first of all, there's some confusion about what Tuskegee Airmen were in Seymour. The famous Tuskegee Airmen flew fighter airplanes in Italy and North Africa, and they were known as the Red Tails. There's a movie about them, and they're the ones that, you know, like made the news. That wasn't the people that were at Freeman Field. After they taught black people to fly fighters, and there was a significant thought that they couldn't even teach a black person to fly a airplane, but that was pretty successful. So then they said, maybe we could teach black people to fly bombers. Well, this was a whole new challenge, though, because these airplanes had a crew of 5 or 6, so they had to work together. And this, oh God, black people, a lot of people thought that blacks were truly inferior and couldn't learn to do stuff. They weren't good for much. And in the military, that was pretty prevalent. But even so, they said, hey, we're going to do that. So they created the 477th Bomb Group, and they were going to teach them to fly B-25s. So, and that was the group that ended up at Seymour, not the fighter pilots. So, oh, but just as a side note, there's always a story. They have a P-51 that's painted up like the Red Tails, the Tuskegee Airmen group, and they fly it around to different air shows and stuff. And that airplane was actually at Seymour in 2020. I spent a lot of time at the airport because I was doing flight instruction and pilot examinations and everything. My phone rings, and this guy says, identifies himself. He says, hey, I'm over here in St. Louis, and I'm bringing the Red Tail P-51. We're going to the Dayton Air Fair. But we know you have a Tuskegee Airmen exhibit, and we want to see it. We want to stop there. And I said, hey, that'd be great. Come on over. What time are you going to be here? And he said, oh, well, I guess we'll be there around 3. We have about an hour, and then we got to get back in the air and fly over to Dayton, which isn't very far from Seymour. So this was going to be easy. 3 o'clock comes. No P-51. 3:30, no P-51. Finally, about 10 minutes before, I hear the thing, and they have a distinctive sound. It doesn't sound like other airplanes. So, no, here they come. So they land, and the first thing all little airplane pilots ask is, where's the bathroom? So we tell them where the restrooms are, and they run in the terminal building in the back room, go to the bathroom, come back out and say, guy says, well, we better look at your exhibit, because we only have about an hour. We got to get out of here. I said, what time do you have to be in Dayton? He said, well, they close at 5, but we have to get there before 5 o'clock so they have time to put our airplane in the hangar. I looked at him and just deadpanned and said, "You're already late," because he was. He said, "What do you mean I'm already late?" I said, "You forgot the time zone change. You started in St. Louis, and now you're in the Eastern time zone." "Oh my God, the time changes?" Yeah, it changes. Now, all pilots know about time zones. We fly across them all the time. And this guy's flying a fast airplane. God help him, he didn't know the time zone change. I didn't feel very sorry for him. And he says, "Holy crap," but it wasn't crap. And anyway, he says, "Get back in the plane," to the other guy. And they hopped in, fired it up, and left. Never walked across the street to look at the exhibit. And probably caused the people in Dayton to have to work overtime, as it was, because truly he was already late.
Did they come back?
Nope. Oh, but we're not sure how they do this. This airplane, these people keep wrecking this airplane. It's been landed with the landing gear up 3 times. And they keep fixing it up in Bemidji, Minnesota at Air Corps. So anyway, that's enough about the P-51s, but I like to tell the story.
You know what Bemidji, Minnesota is famous for?
What, sir? What?
Do you know what Bemidji, Minnesota is most famous for?
I do not. What's Bemidji famous for?
Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan State Park is up there to have.
Oh, okay. I've never been there. I would love to go through Air Corps. It's a big place.
Now you know.
Anyway, so as I said, the people who were really in Seymour were the 477th Bomb Group, and I said why they were here. Now, so they started this 477th, and they sent them to various bases. But you know what? In typical of the way black people were treated then, they always sent them to places that were crummy. The runways were too short. They didn't have enough housing, not enough hangars. They didn't have enough. So they had them down at Godman Field. Godman Field is the airfield for Fort Knox, Kentucky, near Louisville. Oh, well, what are we going to do? This isn't satisfactory. Oh, send them to Seymour. They've got big runways, empty hangars. So up they come. They show up around April 1st. But we have segregation issues. I get it right. Not the president, but and it wasn't George Marshall, who was his chief of staff. Anyway, the military had said that the military services are to be integrated. There's not supposed to be separate facilities. Well, but that was just lip service, because at the individual military bases, there was widespread segregation. So they come to Seymour, and oh my God, there are going to be black people in the White Officers Club. That won't do. So there's a big story about this. Some of these guys actually had flown P-51s in Italy and North Africa. So these weren't all like green trainees. They'd been around. So a group of them decided they would integrate the White Officers Club. So they went over there and got refused. And so after they got refused, then a bunch of them did that over 3 or 4 days, and 61 people got arrested. But the base commander knew he was on thin ice, so he finally had to let everybody go. So I was doing this, I was ad-libbing. I know what's on the slides. All right, so in Seymour, they weren't well received, is what I said. By the way, Indiana back then was a hotbed of segregation, right? The imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan was from Indiana. Robert Selway, who was the base commander, was a staunch segregationist. And so all this became a problem. So what ended up happening was they created a separate officers club for black people, but they couldn't call it the Black Officers Club, right? So the way they spun it was to say, oh, we'll have one officers club for trainees and another one for the permanent party. Now, it just happened that all the trainees were black and all the permanent party were white, right? So, but in normal fashion, the officers club they created for the black people was, of course, crappy. It was the old NCO club that had been closed for months and wasn't well maintained, and they didn't want to be good enough for them. And, of course, the black guys weren't having any of that. So Selway decided that to enforce this, and he made all of the officers sign an order that said that they would go to that they would adhere to the trainee club and the permanent party club. And 101 of the black guys refused the base commander's offer. And refusing an order from a superior officer is a very grave offense in the military. All right. So here's what I want to try. Now I want to try showing you something here, see if this works. I have a video. Just give me a minute to cue it for you. Wrong thing. How about I click on the video?
Even as the fighters did well in combat over Europe, African-American crews ran into problems back home.
Can't go too far, it gets real crappy.
Was a navigator bombardier in the 477th Bombardment Group.
Finally, they moved the group up to Seymour, Indiana. But when we got up there, we were confronted again with very discriminatory and segregated position by the command.
By 1944, the War Department prohibited segregation of military facilities. But Group Commander Colonel Robert Selway created 2 officers' clubs at Freeman Field. One for African American trainees and one for whites. On April 5th, 1945, an organized group of African American officers deliberately attempted to enter the Forbidden Club.
You can't come in. Why? You belong to the trainees, and the trainees can't come in.
I'm a member of the base flight.
Well, you can't come in.
One of their leaders, Roger Terry, shouldered aside an officer who blocked his way.
There were 61 officers who were put under arrest for entering or attempting to enter the officers' club.
They arrested the first group under a letter order. And they arrested 61 of us in 2 days. I was in the first group that was arrested.
Selway soon released most of the officers, but he prepared a statement spelling out which personnel could use which club and ordered everyone at Freeman Field to sign it.
Base Regulation 85-2 identifies the assignments of facilities for all base personnel.
To me, he said, I agree to be segregated and discriminated against. No way was I going to sign this.
There was 101 who refused the order to segregate yourself. I'm one of those 101.
To refuse that direct order of a commanding officer in time of war was a violation of Article of War 64. The maximum punishment was death.
This is a direct order. Sign the regulation.
The arrests at Freeman Field triggered a strong public reaction. Congressmen and senators complained to the War Department. For nearly 2 weeks, the 101 officers were held under arrest. It was like a Nazi prison camp, one man said. Finally, the case reached the top. General George Marshall ordered Selway to release all but 3 of the men. Roger Terry, the only man convicted, suffered a fine, loss of rank, and a dishonorable discharge. As for Selway, he was relieved of his command because he violated Army regulation. The war ended before the 477th Bombardment Group could see action. But at Freeman Field, these airmen too had scored a crucial triumph. At home.
Double victories for the Freeman Field Mutiny. That's it. So that's what that's about. Victory at home, victory abroad. And Freeman Field is the victory at home.
So that's it. That's a clip out of a 30-minute movie that the National Park Service had created, and they showed down at Moton Field. There's a Tuskegee Museum in Tuskegee, Alabama, and they show this thing down there. A guy that's part of our museum board had the video, and I caused that 4 minutes to be captured out of it to put in this talk. So anyway, let me go back to the slideshow. And let's see, where were we here when we got involved in that? We were down here. Now, like that. Okay. So the video is somewhat over dramatic, by the way. They said that they were locked up for 2 weeks and quote, like a Nazi prison camp. Okay.
Lock up so many men in one facility?
I'm about to tell you.
All right.
Give me a chance. There was no